Hello, I'm Lee Hopwood. I am the CEO here at the CCMA, and I am delighted to be joined by Katy Bevan, who is the Business Director at Page Personnel. And it's with Katy that we have created the Salary and Skills Guide that we have launched now twice, 2022 and 2023. It's 6 months since we launched the 2023 edition, and Katy and I thought we would have a catch-up live here on LinkedIn to see what has changed since we launched the guide. Now, first of all, Katy, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Now, Katy, this morning, the Employers' Skills Survey was released by the government. I know you've taken a look at it.
Yes.
What have you discovered? What have you seen?
Well, you know what, it was an interesting read, but I think the first thing to mention is the data set's actually from 2022. So it comes from the year in which we launched our first guide. What I particularly enjoyed reading is everything that we reported and talked about in our guide last year has been backed up by the data that's been released today. So that's always really encouraging to hear. You know, things like the number of vacancies being over and above the last data set, which the government released in 2017. More roles are hiring, more companies are reporting, skills gaps and roles that they're finding difficult to fill, which is no surprise to anyone who was recruiting in last year's marketplace. One of the other areas which I thought was quite an interesting read was the difference between the number of businesses reporting that they were supporting and paying for external training and support in 2017 was around 66% compared to 2022, which was lower at 60%. Now, considering roles have evolved, they're a lot more complicated and new positions out in last year's market than there were in 2017. I think that number was maybe a little bit disappointing, but not a surprise. We focused quite heavily, didn't we, on the 2022's guide in terms of the importance of training and development and everybody feeling as though they've got progression and a future within the business that they're working for. And I think that really did lead us to a place where, retention was quite challenging at the time. But I actually think we've already made a U-turn on that, which is great, because we reported in our 2023's guide, the conversations were a little bit less around concerns on progression, and it was a bit more concerns on understanding what the value of the business was. If you remember rightly, one of the stats that we reported in 2023's guide from a survey that we did over at Page was actually 1 in 2 individuals ranked really highly on the priority of understanding the business's goals and values as being a great reason to stay or join an organization. So when we're looking at these training and development stats, we've already made that move. I think one of the steps that we've made since the launch of the guide this year is a lot of external investment in leadership and management, which is great. I know I've gone on an external leadership course this year and really enjoyed it. A lot of my managers that I'm working with in the contact center space are all referring to these amazing leadership courses or events that they've been on, and I think everyone will agree that it's a really key part in development, in understanding outside of your organization some key principles and practices to then be able to bring back within to the business. So I think we've already made some brilliant steps on that. So it was interesting to compare all of that with the data set of what we see in last year anyway.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing your views on that. I think that's really useful from our industry perspective, the contact center space. But so moving that question on, so you've just done almost a comparison between 2022 and 2023's guide. So tell us what has changed. I'm going to say at a high level, but what has changed since we launched the guide 6 months ago?
So one of the changes that we've seen since we launched the guide in April is the number of roles in the UK seem to have stabilised. When we reported the guide back in 2022, we were looking around an average of 60,000. On the day of the guide launch, we talked about it being more around the 45,000 mark, which was obviously quite a big drop. Since then, we've seen it stabilise with a peak of around 50,000, which I think is expected for this time of year. But interestingly, within that, we've seen a decrease of over 20% in applications at the frontline level.
That's incredible. And why do you think that's been? Why have we seen that drop in frontline applications?
Well, I think, as I referred to before, in the engagement survey, when we talked about 1 and 2, really putting an emphasis on the business's values and plans. I think in true contact center fashion, the industry's really risen to that challenge. I think that's been really taken on board. And I think organizations across the board have heavily invested in retaining existing staff. I think our senior leaders have done a truly fantastic job of establishing that clear vision and prioritizing training and talent retention over new hires.
That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. And so how long does it take to find talent? In the guide, we talk about an average of 5 days to hire. That's obviously 6 months ago. What's the situation today?
I guess with the applications decreasing, that's created that timeline to actually over double. So we're looking at an average of around 14 days from a frontline perspective to get from that active role through to that accepted offer stage, which is the longest we've seen it in quite some time.
So as well as obviously that the number of applicants has decreased, what else is driving that length of time?
Do you know, I believe it is due to businesses being quite cautious. They've done all of this work to set in, a great culture and a great retention. I think there's just a bit of a cautious feeling around bringing in new people to the business. I think, budgets being tighter, obviously salaries, stabilizing at that higher level, in addition to regulatory changes. It's created a bit of an apprehension, I'd say, on bringing in new talent. I'd say the trend is noticeable across all levels, but we'll definitely delve into the leadership side of things on our conversation as well today.
Yeah, I do really want to do that. And so talking about those roles, where there is a desire to stay recruiting internally, where are those most popular roles? Where are the most in-demand roles that are being recruited for at the moment?
Interestingly, the in-demand roles haven't really shifted too much since we launched the guide. We're still seeing complaints ranking in the top 5. Quality is coming up close, but interestingly enough, those quality roles tend to be internal progression opportunities, which is another fantastic example of businesses showcasing some excellent retention strategies there, hiring, dedicated quality staff. It's becoming a really good progression option to those on the front line to take those, skills and empathy and, great foundations and implementing them into many, many new quality functions that are expanding across contact centres.
And you know what? That it doesn't surprise me that quality is coming up the rankings. When you look at the headlines around customer service, it just doesn't surprise me. So okay, so we've talked about roles. What about skills? We discussed the skills that leaders needed during the salary guide launch, but how are these skills evolving now? We've had the summer. What's happening now?
Yeah, so in the guide, we emphasize the need for leadership skills, things like empathy, excellence, commercial acumen, the need for insights and influence from our leaders. I think we have seen a powerful shift in this, primarily I'd say driven by regulatory changes, the necessity for technology adaptation in the current climate. Leaders have not only showcased these skills, but they've also had to do that in addition to doing all of the amazing work on retaining staff that we talked about earlier, but also closely examining, the design of that contact center, potentially restructuring, moving things around, exploring options like BPOs. So I think our leaders have really, really risen in the last couple of months, and the skills that they're demonstrating are just absolutely amazing, really inspiring.
That is so good to hear. That's so good to hear. And you know, we're talking to contact center leaders all the time, and you know, it's tough. It's tough. But it is good to hear that they're doing a grand job. But what do you think is the long-term impact of this shift?
Honestly, I think many of our leaders are working tirelessly at the moment and may start to consider a change, if not already. I think burnout is a really real risk. Many businesses are in a kind of bunker down mentality at the moment, which I think we will all agree is not sustainable. You know, fresh talent is key to diversity of thought from a leadership perspective. I think our leaders need now what our frontline staff needed early this year, which is, you know, a clear vision, support with their responsibilities, including investment in hiring, you know, key senior staff to be able to share the loads, you know, the ability to make bold choices. I really do think it is time for leaders within the customer function to really get that say in shaping business strategies overall.
Thank you for being honest with us on that, because it's I know that was quite something that you were have thought about a lot, about how to share that, and it is a concern that burnout is a real risk. So that it does beg the very big question: what's happened to salaries? Have salaries increased along with the changes you just described?
Salaries have seen some increase. I wouldn't say any, you know, significant numbers. No dramatic shifts there. Especially, you know, considering averages had already gone up in April. I think, you know, salary and rewards isn't at the moment a key driver to a lot of leaders who are or might be considering a change. The interesting thing that we're finding, the main motivation that is coming up time and time again, it's not salary, it's autonomy.
Interesting. That empowerment.
Yeah, I think really being able to make these decisions, you know, really being able to put into effect what the contact center operation needs, or the, you know, being able to add to the business strategy in a way that is going to have commercial gain, you know, but also is going to support what that contact center needs to be effectively powering an organization.
And I mean, that's fascinating, because when you think about the insights that the contact center has, leaders being able to get access to that insights at a touch of a button, hopefully for many, then I mean, they've got just so much information to be able to make change, both within the contact center and the wider business. So yeah, you know that we bang the drum about the contact center being really recognized for the value it can bring. No, that's really interesting. So predictions. I have to ask you, after you've shared what you've seen happen in the last 6 months and where we are today, what are your predictions?
I think we will continue to see a positive movement in frontline. I think hopefully we will start to see some really great progression opportunities, which will, you know, improve the overall perception, you know, of contact centers as a career choice. I really hope we do see that. And I think we're definitely going in the right direction. From a leadership perspective, I think we're yet to see the impact of what is happening here and now today in many organizations. You know, the pressures that these individuals are under, no doubt will create some movement. I think sometimes movement can be a good thing. And I'm really hoping that is the reason why we see a shift, you know, and not because we continue to go down this road of, you know, constant challenges and pressures. So I think there's definitely going to be some movement coming up in the next couple of months in that senior market space. But I think fingers crossed it is going to be some positive movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? This has been fascinating. Katy, thank you so much for joining me here on LinkedIn to bring us up to date and up to speed with what's going on in the market. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Please do, if you want to go and download the salary and skills guide that we launched back in April 2023, just earlier this year, then please do go onto the website ccma.org.uk and download it straight away from there. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Katy.